She didn't come with a crowd. She didn't come with cameras. She came with a binder and the truth. And by the time she left, $1 billion cover-up wasn't just exposed. It was undone. Hi there. Hope you're doing well. Today I want to share a story that might just change the way you look at silence, power, and the systems we're told to trust. It's not about noise or headlines. It's about one woman, Pam Bondi, who walked into a hearing room and asked the question no one else dared to say out loud. What happened next wasn't explosive. It was quiet, but it shattered everything. This is the story of what can happen when someone stops waiting for permission on me and starts demanding the truth. The hearing room buzzed with low voices and the faint rustle of paper, but it wasn't casual. It was cautious. The kind of quiet that comes when people already know something big is about to happen, but no one wants to say it first. Outside, the marble steps of the Capitol were lined with protesters, parents, veterans, educators, all holding signs that asked one question. Where did the money go? Inside, the air was heavy, not with noise, but with waiting. Reporters leaned forward, ready to pounce. The committee members reviewed their notes, careful not to make eye contact with the cameras. At the center of it all sat Pam Bondi, alone at the witness table, binder closed, eyes forward. Her face held the kind of stillness that only comes from experience, the kind that knows storms and doesn't flinch. She had asked to testify. She wasn't subpoenaed. She wasn't summoned. She asked to come, because she had seen something buried deep in funding reports and obscure legislation, and she couldn't unsee it. What began as a casual audit had turned into a haunting pattern. Public programs shuttered with no explanation, medical units closed, education grants vanished mid-semester, rural clinics stripped of basic resources. But no one said a word, until now. What she said next didn't just raise eyebrows, it made the entire committee sit up straight. Pam stood. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but it didn't waver. "Chancellor Hallstrom," she said, addressing the sharply dressed man seated near the panel, "do you believe your executive authority permits you to override funding protocols that were ratified by Congress and signed into law by the President?" A silence rippled through the room like the drop of a pin in a cathedral. Victor Hallstrom, Chancellor of Federal Development Initiatives, was the man who controlled how discretionary funding was redistributed during emergencies. A man with a title that carried weight, too much of it. He blinked, his lips parted, but before he could answer, a young aide rushed through the side door, his expression urgent. He whispered into the ear of the committee chair, who frowned and nodded slowly. "Miss Bondi," the chair said, "we've just received a disclosure you may want to see." An envelope was handed to her, sealed, heavy. Pam took it without hesitation. She opened it slowly, deliberately, so that every crinkle of paper echoed through the silence. Inside, a leaked memo, internal, confidential. It revealed that Chancellor Hallstrom had personally invoked a rarely used clause called emergency discretionary override, bypassing 2 major audit checkpoints and redirecting $1.8 billion in public funds, without public notification. Pam's eyes didn't blink. "So," she said calmly, "this wasn't a miscommunication. This wasn't a paperwork delay. This was a choice, a deliberate one." But the truth wasn't just in the memo. It was in the fallout that no one wanted to talk about. Victor Hallstrom adjusted his collar. His voice was smooth, but his hands betrayed him, fidgeting slightly, knuckles white. "The clause exists for urgent circumstances," he said. "We believed—" "Who's we?" Pam interrupted, still composed. "And what was the urgency?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air, thick with implication. "Because after your directive," she continued, "a job retraining program for coal miners in West Virginia was shut down. A literacy grant for Native communities in Montana was frozen, and an entire senior care subsidy in Michigan disappeared overnight." She opened her binder. Inside were pages, each marked with color-coded tabs, emails, budget lines, handwritten notes. Each tab wasn't a number, it was a story. "These aren't just figures," she said. "They're families, classrooms, patients. They're the people who thought this system saw them." She pointed to one record. "This one shows that a free meal program in Camden was cut mid-semester. Administrators were told to seek alternative options. The next day, 600 students showed up to school with no lunch." Hallstrom tried to reply again. Pam raised her hand gently. "I'm not here to play politics," she said. "I'm here to ask when oversight became optional." She turned another page. "This document confirms that nearly 70% of the funds were rerouted to foreign infrastructure contracts, some of which have no performance reviews, no metrics, and no scheduled audits." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You say it's legal. I'm asking if it's ethical." She could have stopped there, but then she opened the binder to the red tab, and everything changed. The red tab. Pam flipped to it slowly. She didn't speak right away. "This," she said finally, "is the reallocation record for the Millbridge Workforce Initiative." She looked directly at the committee. This program had trained over 1,200 unemployed workers in manufacturing and logistics. It had completed its audit, it had bipartisan support, and it was halfway through its final rollout. She paused. Then the funding vanished. No warning, no press release, no explanation. She didn't look angry, she looked heartbroken. She flipped to another tab, blue this time. "Cambria County, rural Pennsylvania. Emergency Housing Relief Grant, terminated 4 days before it was set to launch. The local nonprofit had already hired its outreach team. Over 250 families were already processed for assistance. The staff were let go, the families back on the waiting list." Pam's voice lowered, almost a whisper. "These aren't stories from a novel. They're happening, right now, while we debate whether or not someone should have filed a form." The camera shutters clicked. The chair leaned back. Victor Hallstrom sat still, his jaw tight. Pam looked at them all. "You redirected their futures," she said, with a stroke of a pen and not so much as a town hall meeting. The room didn't move, and that was the point. Because silence wasn't indifference anymore, it was impact. But just when the room started to feel the weight of what was lost, a voice from far away would make it all real. The screen at the back of the chamber lit up. A grainy video feed flickered into focus, showing a tired but resolute face. "Mayor Ava Roswell," the committee chair announced, "joining us from Echo Ridge, Wyoming." Her voice cracked before she spoke. "Our town had a mobile health unit," she began. "It served 5 counties. We don't have a hospital, just that van. It brought prenatal care, diabetes screenings, cancer checks. It was everything." She looked down at her notes, then back up. "The grant was pulled 2 weeks after we expanded the program. We'd just ordered new equipment. We'd just hired 2 new nurses." Pam stood still, listening. She didn't move. She didn't need to. "We lost a patient last week," the mayor said, her voice barely holding. "He didn't make it to the next county in time. He was 67. His name was Harold." The room didn't breathe. A beat of silence passed that felt heavier than 1,000 words. Pam stepped forward again, gently. "Commissioner Hallstrom, is that what strategic reallocation looks like?" Victor Hallstrom didn't reply. His fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the folder in front of him. A rhythm that betrayed more than discomfort. It hinted at something deeper. But the echoes of loss weren't done yet. Another voice had just gone live. "We have another live request," the chair said, glancing at a staffer who handed him a slip of paper. "Dr. Kemi Okoro from Atlanta." The screen changed. Dr. Okoro appeared in her scrubs, behind her a bare clinic wall with peeling paint and stacked boxes. I run a youth mental health center, she said quickly. We lost funding mid-quarter. I had to lay off half my team. We had no notice, no options. She took a breath, then let it out slowly. Last week, a 14-year-old came in, suicidal. We couldn't admit him. We didn't have the staff. I had to tell his mother to try another clinic. Her voice trembled. There isn't another clinic, not for 60 miles. The feed glitched just once. But it didn't matter. The message landed. Dr. Okoro stared into the camera. This isn't hypothetical. This is right now. And it's getting worse. Pam looked at the panel. No words, just gravity. Pam had laid out the facts. The testimonies made them real. Now, she revealed the pattern hidden behind them all. Pam returned to the witness table. She didn't look at her binder this time. She looked straight at the panel. What you just heard isn't isolated, she said. It's coordinated, it's consistent, and it's deliberate. She pointed to the red tab again. These programs weren't under review. They weren't failing. They were passing audits, meeting goals, and helping people. She let the silence settle. So why were they cut? She turned to face Hallstrom. You say it was strategy, but strategy without transparency isn't governance. It's abandonment. No one spoke. Pam stepped away from the table. You want to know what this is really about? She asked. She walked toward the whiteboard, and then she did something no witness had ever done in that room. She drew the system and exposed its flaw with a marker. Pam picked up a black marker. No one interrupted. She drew 3 boxes, then arrows between them. This is the process, she said. Emergency override, internal notification, passive review. She circled the last box. This step, passive review, is where you come in, she said to the committee. But it's not a review in any real sense. No vote, no questions, just a report quietly filed. Then silence. She turned to face them all. We've built a process that can move billions with a pen, but requires no voice to question it. She capped the marker. Let the board stand. That's not oversight. That's abdication. The room didn't move, and in that stillness, something had cracked. Not loudly, but undeniably. And that crack, it was just wide enough for someone new to step through. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, a voice broke through the stillness. It was Congresswoman Lena Moore. She had been silent for most of the hearing, her pen barely moving, her gaze unreadable. Now she leaned forward, pressed the mic button, and said, "Miss Bondi, I want to thank you." Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it now, the sound of someone waking up. I walked into this room thinking we were here to review a budgetary oversight, but what I've heard today, it's not a blip. It's a breach. She turned to the chair. I move to initiate a formal review of all discretionary reallocations from the past 5 years, and I propose immediate legislation to suspend emergency override powers until a full audit threshold is established. A silence followed, this one heavy with surprise. The chair looked to his legal advisor. A whisper passed between them, a nod. Motion acknowledged, the chair said. It will be entered into executive session. Pam stood off to the side, binder still in hand. She didn't react. She didn't celebrate, because she wasn't done yet. She could have ended there, but what she shared next, a letter from a forgotten classroom, cut even deeper than the data ever could. Pam stepped forward once more. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "This is from Marlene," she said softly. "She's a reading instructor in rural Idaho. She ran a weekend literacy program for children who couldn't get help anywhere else. Nothing fancy. A donated room. A box of books." She unfolded the letter carefully, like it mattered. Because it did. "When the funding stopped," Pam read, "I told the kids we couldn't meet anymore. One boy, just 7 years old, asked if the books had done something wrong. He thought we were being punished. Pam looked up. A child thought books were being punished. That's the world we've made. The scribbling stopped. Even the cameras slowed. A stillness came over the room that no one dared break. "You want to call it efficiency," Pam said. "You want to say it's just numbers. But that child isn't a number. And neither is the mother who lost her clinic, or the veteran who lost his roof, or the mayor who lost her voice." And then, one more time, she closed the binder. Just when she thought her role in the hearing had ended, an unexpected offer changed everything. The hearing had ended. Pam had stepped into the hallway, past the buzz of reporters, past the bright lights. But before she could leave, a voice called out, "Miss Bondi!" Congresswoman Lena Moore caught up to her, holding a slim folder. "You know this isn't over," she said. Pam nodded. "It never is." Moore held out the folder. "I want your input as we draft the Oversight Reform Bill, not as a witness, as a partner." Pam took the folder, but she didn't answer right away. She looked back at the chamber. "Only if the people who showed up today get to be part of it too," she said. Moore smiled. "That's the idea." And as she walked away, the final chapter of this story wasn't a conclusion. It was a beginning. Pam left the building not with fanfare, but with purpose. Outside, a small group had gathered, teachers, veterans, young activists. They didn't chant, they held signs. "Oversight is not optional. We deserve a voice. Thank you for speaking up." She passed them quietly. But then she stopped. One girl, no older than 15, held a handmade sign. The words were painted in crooked letters. "Silence is compliance with systems that forget their people." Pam looked at her. "Did you write that?" The girl nodded, cheeks flushed. Pam didn't ask her name. She just said, "Don't stop writing." Back in the car, Pam didn't open the messages pouring into her phone. From parents, journalists, doctors, even a janitor from a shuttered school. She just looked out the window, past the stairs, past the cameras, past the building that still held the same walls, but not the same silence. She hadn't come to start a movement. But sometimes the truth does that all by itself. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Reform never is. But something had shifted, and now, finally, someone was listening. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel something, then don't let it end here. Give it a thumbs up, not for the algorithm, but for the people who finally had their voices heard. Share it with someone who still believes that truth matters. That one voice can still shake the walls of silence. And if you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or left behind by the systems meant to protect you, drop a comment below. Because this channel isn't just about stories. It's about reminding each other that we still have a say. Subscribe for more real stories that cut through the noise. Stories that don't need shouting to shake the ground. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and never underestimate the quiet power of truth.